I want to bring in MS Now's Nnamdi Egawonwu, who is in Minneapolis. Mark Leibovich is a staff writer at The Atlantic and MS Now political contributor. Catherine Christian is a former Manhattan assistant district attorney and MS Now legal analyst. Mark, how do you explain this apparent disconnect between what the president is saying, softer touch, and these stories about ICE officers and how they're conducting themselves, and the fact that educators have felt it's gotten so bad they need to go to court?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always going to be a disconnect with Donald Trump, with what Donald Trump says in reality, frankly. I mean, that's kind of who he is. I mean, I think what's really damning at this point, though, is the idea of a softer touch when you juxtapose that with this testimony from teachers and principals and people who are actually, running schools or trying to run schools is incredibly damning. And it's incredibly certainly harmful to the school and the community, but it's something that people who are out there watching can relate to. And obviously, it's impossible to have a soft touch when you have these dozens of men and women in uniforms sort of marching through a school where kids are supposed to be learning. I mean, that's obviously not the nature of what's supposed to be going on there. So I'm not at all surprised by these numbers. I imagine for as long as this keeps going, those numbers are going to get higher and higher.
Nnamdi, the superintendent we just heard from, said she actually had a glimmer of hope when she heard Tom Homan would draw down troops. She said that glimmer of hope lasted about 3 minutes. What are people there saying today?
There's still a lot of concern, a lot of frustration. We spoke here at the Whipple building to a ESL teacher who talked about how 2 of the students that she's been tutoring are no longer coming in because of the concerns that they have over ICE's presence in this city. So that frustration is persisting even after that announcement. Many people skeptical at best and saying there's still going to be 2,000 some odd federal agents on the ground here, and that's still going to create that widespread fear that we've been hearing about that is impacting students at schools. I also today, though, have started to hear more criticism of Governor Walz, which was interesting. A lot of people feel that the unprecedented cooperation and collaboration that Tom Homan spoke about yesterday, specifically between county leaders and ICE agents, creating an environment, for instance, where if someone's released from a county jail, they may notify ICE of that person if they want to detain them. That sparked frustration from people who say that that is a massive concession, and all that Walz was able to get out of it was a reduction of about 20% of the agents here. So we see that frustration persisting. We've also learned now of frustration among federal agents here, the rank and file agents here. MS Now's Nick McCool spoke to Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara about how federal agents have been confused and frustrated by some of the scenes they've seen play out here in the Twin Cities. I want to play for you a portion of that interview now.
A lot of them, have been shocked by a lot of things that have been happening. A number of them have resigned or have retired since then. And there's just been a lot of confusion in the ranks there. Confusion as to who's in charge, what is the goal, what is the direction here.
I want to note that one of the changes Tom Homan announced yesterday was that Customs and Border Patrol agents and ICE agents would now be operating under one joint unified command center. He said that was being done to make sure that everyone's aligned and on the same page. But when we speak to people here, the first thing they say is, how was that not happening before? So frustration, confusion, that's certainly persisting in the days and hours after Tom Homan's announcement yesterday, Chris.
So, Catherine, what can you tell us about this lawsuit from the Minnesota school districts, and what are the chances that it could change the situation we're seeing on the ground?
It's a very good lawsuit, and it has merit to it, because over 30 years, the federal government policy was that immigration, and this was back when immigration was part of INS, Immigration and Nationalization Service, any enforcement, you should stay away from schools and other sensitive places where children are unless absolutely necessary, unless you got special permission. And even if you got special permission, you had to be very discreet about the enforcement. So this was a change of policy. And when you change policy, the federal law, there's an Administrative Procedure Act that requires there be notice and special procedures. And there wasn't here. The Trump administration just said, we're not going to follow that policy anymore. So they are on firm ground. And this was brought by the education unions in Minnesota.
Mark, in another sign that the DHS has no intention of backing down, we just got this from NBC News about a growing effort to buy mega warehouses to house detainees. The proposed centers are so large, some could hold as many as 8,000 people at once, according to a DHS spreadsheet of more than 20 potential locations verified by NBC News. By comparison, the largest federal prison in the U.S. has roughly 4,000 inmates, half of that. How do you assess the fight between the people heading up this immigration crackdown and the people opposing it? Can the overwhelming concerns that we see on the streets and in polls change anything?
I don't see that changing anything at all. I mean, it's hard to think of any community that wants to see spaces like this deployed for this reason at all. I mean, first of all, on a purely logistical matter, I mean, this takes years to sort of get up and running. I mean, this is not the kind of thing you can just flip a switch on. But having said all that, I don't think most people want to see their government taxpayers and their tax dollars put to this kind of thing. And it's not, I think, again, what most people voted for. I mean, this is not the kind of disruption people were looking for in their communities. They were assuming that the president or the would-be president was sort of speaking, to the aspirational hopes of getting criminals off the streets and getting, people with criminal records out of the country. That doesn't seem to be what's happening here. And this is not what people think that these facilities should be used for.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point about it takes a long time, typically, to get these things up and running. And then I think about Alligator Alcatraz, which they seem to turn around very quickly. And look, the frustration showing in the polls, people increasingly opposed to what ICE is doing, Mark. But there was also this from Quinnipiac. 47% of voters say they know someone who is living in fear. That superintendent we heard from earlier said a board member was followed from her residence with her 3-year-old child in the back of the car, both of them natural-born citizens, all the way to her child's daycare. I mean, it's one thing to oppose a policy on political grounds, but talk about the potential for fear to be a motivator as we see people more and more voting on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's an intimidation piece to this, certainly from whatever the administration is trying to do. But no one wants to have the government serving this purpose. I mean, no one wants to have the government scaring them. No one wants a heavy-handed approach like this. And again, I do think there's a pretty palpable statement going on in all these polls about how people are not at all happy with this. And I think it's spreading pretty fast. I mean, with every viral video, which seemed to be a daily occurrence, I think these political views or these public views become more and more entrenched. And I think Republicans are beginning to realize this. I don't think they're really course correcting at all. I mean, maybe the rhetoric it is. But again, I mean, this is a very kind of, insidious sort of day-to-day, life kind of situation for people that obviously is very, very powerful. And I think is going to have some really negative effects for the people who are held responsible for it.
Catherine, Steve Bannon suggested another, assignment for ICE when he was doing his radio show. Listen to what he said.
You're damn right. We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen.
Speaking of intimidation, ICE surrounding polling places, Catherine, is that even legal?
No, it's not. And thank goodness Mr. Bannon is not in charge. But no, it's not. I mean, there are parameters. You can't even, go in front of a polling place and advocate for people to vote for your candidate. That's illegal. So no, it's not legal.